Alright, we're going to talk about a couple of other things that are sort of, maybe will be useful for you. One is, a common complaint I hear from people who are starting to use the debugger is that they say their breakpoints aren't being hit. The most likely cause of this, there's two things. One is you can be using Alt F5 and you're not running it like I said before. You need to run it with Start Debugging F5 or press this green play button. One of those two things. The other thing is you need to understand that if a line doesn't execute, the breakpoint will not be hit. So if a line, for instance, here's an example. I have this if 0 equals 0, which is clearly a true condition, right? So I am going to start this thing up and the program exits, breakpoint's never hit. Why is the breakpoint not hit? Because this clause is never, this line is never executed. This else clause is never executed. So the line is never hit, the breakpoint is never hit. If I put the breakpoint here, for example, execute it, now I see that in fact the breakpoint is hit. This breakpoint is hit. And if I step over this, prints it out, goes to the else skips right over this cout. The cout is not executed. If the breakpoint's not hit, the line didn't execute. So there's a simple solution for you. If the breakpoint isn't hit, the line didn't execute. Okay, provided that it's a solid. Sometimes you'll see like these circle of white things, but you probably won't see that. But if it's a solid red circle and it didn't hit, the program didn't execute. The line didn't execute. Another thing we're going to look at is when you set your breakpoints. Sometimes the breakpoints want to move around. For instance, in this case, I have this myObject class instance, and when I hit debug, you'll see that it actually moves the breakpoint down to the next line. That's because your breakpoints need to be set on executable lines. They need to set on lines that actually do something. This is just a declaration, doesn't actually do anything. If you try to set a breakpoint on white space, while the debugger's running, it won't even put it there. It'll just always put it down the line below, because there's nothing here for it to execute. There's nothing for it to put a breakpoint on. It needs an actual executable line. Okay, so you can't put it on white space. You can't put it. In some cases you can put it on brackets. In some cases you can't. Like I can't put it at the top of that bracket, but I can generally put one at the bottom of the bracket. So you have to be careful where you put your breakpoints. You don't want to put them on variable declarations. Like here, I've tried to declare this character. Clearly, it's not going to work, right? There's just a declaration. There's nothing executing here, so it's not going to put a breakpoint there. So the other thing I'm going to talk about is some of this file I/O stuff, because it's useful to be able to debug the file I/O. Yeah, a lot of times you have problems. You're wondering where you're at in your file. You don't know where you're at in your file. You want to see what's going on while you're doing the file I/O, and it's a little daunting because the file objects are these very complicated classes, these templatized classes. So what we're going to do is we're going to look inside of this IFP. So I've declared a file pointer here called IFP, and I open the file that I'm actually editing right now. So it's a C++ file. I wrote a piece of code that edits the file that it came from, which is cool, right? So I'm going to set here, I'm going to read something into temp. I'm going to test this condition if the character that I read in is equal to white space or not. I'm going to look into this IFP variable, and if we look at it, it looks very complicated, right? The type is something you don't recognize, the value is something you don't recognize, but you can see what's going on inside of here, right? If you go down here and you open the file buffer, and it'll always have this layout of this will always be the same because the members are always the same, okay? So now if you look at my file, you see it has this my file member, and we hit plus on my file. We can see the base. You can see that I've opened the file, and this is exactly, if you look at the top of this file, so it's at the start, pound include IOStream, and you see there's this pointer. This is the file pointer, and if you look at where the pointer is, it's right there. See, it's read off the pound, because if we look back at temp, we'll see that what I read in was that very first. Let me look at temp. Oh, come on, temp. Oh, temp's out of scope. Let me just step one more time. So now if we look, you see that temp has the I that we just read in. The my file here has the pointer, or my file itself has the pointer variable points to the end. So I've read the pound, I've read the I, all that's left, I'm fixing to read the end on the next iteration. So if you want to see what's going on in your file, you can see where you're at while you're reading it. You can interactively look, and this is the base, this is like the whole thing, and then there's the count, which is the number of bytes that are in the file. But you can see that we can look inside of this very complicated looking thing, right? I'll show you again. You go to IFP, click the plus to open it up. There's file buffer, which sounds promising. So click file buffer. There's the one that says there's a member that's called my file. My file, the pointer is the pointer to the current location in the file. So if you look, it's about to read the end, and you can watch. I'm going to step through the code. It's about to read. You see the end disappear from my file because I just read the end into temp. And if we hover over temp, we see that it's an end. So if you need to see where you're at in your file or what your I/O is doing, is your file open, are you reading correctly, you're not sure, you can go inside of this file itself, inside of the file structure in the debugger, and you can look and you can see what's going on. You can watch yourself read from the file. You can see exactly what's going on. Okay? And I think the debugging tutorial is done. If you have any questions about anything that I talked about, feel free to send me an email. Otherwise, have a good day.